He just wanted to be happy, to fall in love, to laugh with friend, to experience a completely ordinary school life, and that's all Yudo Kiba asked for. But life just kicked him up into the corner. On Monday he was ganged up on and beat up. On Tuesday they dumped toilet water all over him. On Wednesday his nude photo was spread online. On Thursday he planned his own suicide, and today he was on the edge of the rooftop. It was raining and he was hesitate to jump. Suddenly the devil appeared, Tomata Kubaru. She offered Kiba the chance to live any happy life he desired, but at the cost of his own life. She would grant his every wish, but in return he would have to surrender himself and become her puppet. Kiba hesitated, struggling to believe what he was hearing. But before he could respond, Kubaru grabbed him, and they both leaped from the edge of the building. The deal was simple. If they survived the fall, he would become her puppet. As they falling down, Kiba remembered the darkness of his life, how he had been bullied endlessly. He realized he had nothing to lose, then he surrendered completely. They landed on the ground, both alive, though Kiba's left arm was broken. The deal was sealed. Kiba wondered why she was doing all this. Kubaru explained that she was simply tired of her own life. Rather than ending it, she decided she wanted to control someone else's life and create a perfect one for them. She swore that she would bring happiness to her puppet. Even though Kiba didn't fully believe her, he shouted anyway that all he wanted was to be happy. After giving Kiba a kiss, Kubaru told him to be obedient and asked him to share one of his wishes. Kiba admitted that he wanted revenge on everyone who had bullied him. Kubaru acknowledged his wish and promised to grant it. The next day, Kiba was alone in the hospital with a large bandage on his left arm. He was lost in thought, recalling how he had been bullied over trivial things, and feeling the weight of a life that seemed worthless. His future felt bleak, and he wished tomorrow would never come. But life pushed forward, and he found himself back at school. His arm was still in a bandage, and the bullying quickly resumed. This time, they tried to draw graffiti on his bandage, but he managed to stop them. Ryouya, the bullies, was annoyed by Kiba's defiance and gave him a hard drop kick, knocking him to the floor. Still not satisfied, Ryouya prepared to strike him again. Just as he raised his fist, Kubaru arrived, with the homeroom teacher that hiding behind the door. The bullies paused as the teacher introduced Kubaru as the new transfer student. Ryouya, intrigued by Kubaru, quickly tried to make small talk, asking for her contact info so he could add her to his friend list. They exchanged a few words, their conversation brief. Once it ended, Kubaru approached Kiba. Kubaru walked up to Kiba and asked for his name. He introduced himself as Yudo Kiba. Ryouya felt little jealous seeing the person he used to bully being approached by someone he wanted to get close to. When Ryouya tried to put Kiba back in his place, Kubaru stepped in to defend him. And as if to add fuel to the fire, the teacher assigned Kubaru to the seat right next to Kiba. Ryouya was so desperate to put Kiba down and prove his worthlessness. Ryouya invited Kubaru into a class group chat. He was ready to share more humiliating moment about Kiba, hoping to turn Kubaru against him. At lunchtime, Kiba and Kubaru sat together, and he couldn't shake the weird feeling of having her by his side. But to Kubaru, lunch break was the perfect opportunity for a strategy meeting. Kiba looked at her in confusion until she reminded him of their plan to get revenge on his bullies. She told him she'd been invited to the class group chat and had already seen an embarrassing video of him that Ryouya had posted. She guessed Ryouya was trying to get her attention and was upset when he didn't get any. Kiba trying to stop Kubaru from watching his embarrassing video, but it was too late. Kubaru already seen it beforehand. Just then, Kubaru noticed that Kiba's embarrassing video hadn't been posted publicly yet. Kiba confirmed that he believed the video had only been shared within the group chat. A mischievous glint appeared in Kubaru's eyes as she got a crazy idea. She suggested they publish the video themselves. Kiba couldn't believe the plan Kubaru had just suggested. The idea of sharing his own humiliating video was absurd to him, but Kubaru was calm and unfazed. He hated the video and wanted revenge, but not like this. Kubaru reminded him that getting back at the bullies would require taking risks. There was no easy way. She also made it clear that he didn't have much of a choice if he wanted his life to change. Her words hit hard, making him realize that this might be the only path forward. She reassured him, noting that if he'd had the strength to stand on the edge of that building yesterday, this was no big deal by comparison. She pointed out how easy it would be. All he had to do was press submit button on the draft sheet prepared. In the draft, she'd set it up to look like the bullies themselves had posted it, complete with disgusting words that would fuel public outrage. The plan was simple: post the video as if it were the bullies boasting about their cruelty. With the right hashtags, it would spread fast and stir up anger, letting the public become the voice of justice. Kiba hesitated, thinking about the chaos this might bring to the school, but Kubaru reminded him that the school had never cared about him, so why worry about protecting it? This was his one chance to take control, and she promised to stay by his side. With a moment's hesitation, Kiba pressed the button. At first, there was silence, no likes, no comments. But then, Kubaru's phone started buzzing with notifications. The post was already catching fire, and people online were furious at the bullies. Kubaru smiled approvingly. In a secluded corner of the school, Ryouya was smoking when one of his classmates found him. His friend was urging Ryouya to check their group chat. Ryouya glanced at his phone and saw an explosion of online outrage targeting him. Someone had posted Kiba's humiliating video, and the internet was furious. Comments revealed that people had even found out the school and were threatening to confront him, with one person, the Kibo, claiming he was on his way. Ryouya brushed it off, confident it was just online talk. He doubted anyone would really come to the school, let alone have the courage to face him. But before he could finish dismissing the threat, a stranger appeared right in front of him, Bakibo himself. As the live streamer directed his phone camera at Ryouya, he introduced himself and his channel, Bakibaki Violence. Ryouya was caught off guard, realizing that Bakibo had made him the main attraction of his next stream. Bakibo even slapped a branded Bakibo band on Ryouya, claiming it was part of the setup for their collaboration. Ryouya tried to push Bakibo away, but his hand slipped, accidentally smacking Bakibo in the face. Bakibo seized the moment, directing the camera at his own face and feigning shock as if he'd been intentionally hit. He turned back to Ryouya, calling him out in front of the live audience and shaming him for his history of bullying. Comments streamed in, condemning Ryouya and cheering Bakibo on. With the chat fired up, Bakibo turned Ryouya into a punching bag, claiming it was all just an act. He assured the audience that Ryouya had agreed to everything by wearing the band, and even laughed off the beating as just acting. Despite Ryouya's bruised face and bloody nose, the viewers seemed convinced it was a performance. Finally, Bakibo leaned in close, asking Ryouya why he bullied others in the first place. Ryouya stared up at the blue sky, lost in thought, wondering why. He tried to recall why things had gone so wrong between him and Kiba. In his mind, he drifted back to the beginning, before the bullying became routine. He remembered the first time he noticed Kiba. He had thought Kiba looked confident and self-assured, even when walking alone. In the flashback, Ryouya greeted Kiba one morning as they walked to school together. He had tried to make small talk, mentioning how some girls had noticed Kiba at the entrance ceremony. But as Ryouya was speaking, Kiba accidentally stepped in dog poop, ruining his new sneakers. Ryouya found it funny and started joking about it, even calling out to some passing girls, eager to share the laugh. The girls didn't find it amusing, and Kiba didn't either. Kiba's face showed his frustration, and he snapped at Ryouya. Ryouya felt uncomfortable and a bit hurt by Kiba's reaction. All he'd wanted was to break the ice, to make things lighthearted, but he had ended up making Kiba angry. Back in the present, Ryouya realized that he'd only wanted to be friends, but somehow that innocent moment had spiraled into something much darker, a cycle of bullying he hadn't meant to start. Hearing Ryouya's words, Bakibo's hostility escalated, and he beat Ryouya more while streaming. In class, the homeroom teacher announced that Ryouya had been assaulted by a trespasser during lunch. Authorities had been contacted, and the culprit was already in custody. Ryouya, now hospitalized for his injuries. With the tension in the air, the teacher decided to dismiss the students early. Kiba sat quietly, feeling a mix of relief and unease. On one hand, he thought it's over, realizing that the bullying might finally stop. Kubaru, sitting beside him, seemed pleased, remarking that their mission was accomplished, and there was no longer anyone to torment him. Yet Kiba couldn't shake the doubt creeping into his thoughts. His humiliating video was still spreading online. It filled him with fear, but strangely, also a hint of something else, hope for change. Kubaru, noticing his silence, leaned over with a playful glint in her eye, suggesting they skip school tomorrow and go on a date. In that moment, Kiba found himself wondering about the future Kubaru was creating for him. Kiba was caught completely off guard when Kubaru asked him out on a date. The shock lingered until the next morning. As he showed up for their date, he was in his school uniform, hoping his parents wouldn't suspect him skipping out on a regular outing. When he saw her, he couldn't help but think how adorable she looked. She noticed his uniform and suggested he go change in a nearby restroom. As he exited the restroom, he spotted a couple of guys trying to hit Kubaru, but she was ignoring them completely. Kaiba was over the moon during his date with Kubaru, feeling like he was in a dream. They eventually sat down for lunch. Kubaru casually asked if he was enjoying himself, and he admitted he was. But then he grew curious. Why had she invited him out in the first place? Her answer was unexpected. She explained that this date was a practice run for his future, a sort of training to help him become the perfect gentleman for when he falls in love and goes on real dates someday. In her words, this was his introduction class on dating, giving him the experience he'd need to avoid mistakes on his first real date. Kaiba was confused, wondering if this meant she wanted more dates with him, but before he could finish his thought, she firmly clarified that she wasn't interested in him like that at all. Kaiba was stunned when Kubaru revealed her view of him. To her, he was nothing more than a puppet with no room for romance or real connection. They continued with their day, and as evening fell, they prepared to part ways. She casually checked if he'd make it home by curfew, and he assured her he would. Just then, Kiba's phone rang. It was his father that's so furious. His father had learned from his teacher that he'd skipped school, and the anger on the other end was intense, culminating in a harsh wish that Kaiba die on the side road. Kiba found himself questioning what kind of parent would say such things. He muttered to himself, which Kubaru overheard. She seemed to pick up on his distress and apologized, feeling responsible for inviting him to skip school. Kiba assured her it was his decision, but she could sense the hurt in his voice. When she asked if he didn't get along with his family, he admitted they didn't see eye to eye, though he quickly tried to brush it off, feeling guilty about speaking poorly of his family. Kubaru, however, insisted he had no obligation to overlook the hurtful things his father said. She even suggested he consider leaving if they truly made him feel this way, offering to let him come with her. Kaiba, doubting her sincerity, pointed out that she didn't even like him, so he couldn't rely on her. After a brief silence, Kubaru explained her motives. She said that precisely because she didn't have romantic feelings for him, she had no ulterior motives. Her offer to help was genuine, purely out of concern for him. She simply wanted to save him from the pain he was in. In that moment, Kiba felt a change within himself. That was the moment he realized he was falling in love with her. As they prepared to go home, Kubaru suggested they stop by a convenience store to grab some snacks and throw an impromptu party. She asked if he liked watching movies, and Kiba found himself unable to refuse her idea. He simply nodded, saying he did. They made their way to the nearby convenience store, rousing the shelves for snacks. Kiba hesitated and finally managed to thank her for everything. Sensing his formal tone, Kubaru encouraged him to drop the formality and call her by her name. He tried, but he couldn't quite bring himself to do it. After picking up a pile of snacks, Kubaru led the way to her place, a high-rise apartment building that left Kiba in awe, and she lived there alone. Once inside, they settled in to watch a movie, and Kiba felt a rare sense of calm. He wished this peaceful moment with her could last forever. However, his phone buzzed, and he saw his father's name on the screen. Kaiba was met with his father's angry voice demanding to know his location. Kiba tried to explain that he was at a friend's house, allowed to stay over, but his father was enraged, assuming Kiba was with a girl and accusing him of being easily seduced. Before Kiba could get a word in, his father telling he will come over and cut the call. Kiba muttered to himself about his father, wishing he didn't have to go back. He figured there was no way his dad would actually know where he was. Kubaru, who had overheard part of the conversation, asked if he was okay. She suggested they stay put and see if his father would really show up. Just then, Kiba's phone rang again. His father was on the line, angrily announcing he was already there and had tracked Kiba's location through a GPS app on his phone. With the call ended, Kiba muttered in disbelief about the tracking app his father had installed. Kubaru, calmly grabbing an envelope, suggested they go down to meet his father. She assured him she would handle things, instructing Kiba to wait by the entrance and firmly telling him not to disobey her. At the entrance, Kiba's father was waiting in anger. When he saw Kubaru, he immediately insulted her, accusing her of seducing his son and making degrading comments about her appearance. Kubaru approached him in silence, while Kaiba trailed behind, feeling uneasy about how things might unfold. As his father's anger grew, he shouted for Kiba to come home. Kubaru stepped forward, maintaining her calm, and handed him the envelope she had brought along. She explained there was 1 million yen inside, meant for emergencies. She offered it to him with a single request, to leave Kiba with her. Kiba and his father were stunned by Kubaru's firm response. His father, irritated, took offense, dismissing her offer as a joke and accusing her of earning the money in unethical ways. Despite Kiba's attempt to intervene, his father's words became more cutting. But Kubaru remained unshaken, countering that his narrow-minded view on how women earn money was pitiful, and that with a father like him, Kiba would never find true happiness. His father retorted, insisting that he was the one guiding Kiba and dismissing her as having no say in his son's future. She pressed him further, questioning his harsh words and reminding him of the impact they could have. His father defensively argued that being hard on Kiba was for his own good, as he believed the world was unforgiving and that this was the way he had been taught to survive. Kubaru laughed, finding his reasoning absurd. She pointed out that his approach wasn't about caring for his son, but rather about avoiding real communication. She warned him that people, especially sons, could be deeply affected by such harsh words, and as his father, he should know how Kiba felt. His father stubbornly claimed he did, rationalizing that his behavior was meant to toughen Kiba up. Kubaru informed him that words alone don't amount to education, and after speaking to him, she felt certain he wasn't essential to Kiba's happiness. She firmly declared her own intentions to guide Kiba toward a better future, one where he could achieve success in academics, popularity, and finances. She didn't intend to be part of his family but saw herself as a guide, helping him build a stable, happy life. With a sharp, determined look, she asserted that from that day forward, she would show them both that Kiba could find happiness under her guidance. Kiba's father was taken aback by Kubaru's confidence, brushing her off as nothing more than a child. But she stayed calm, pulling out her phone and calling her dad. She spoke briefly, asking him to proceed with a certain matter, and ended the call with a cheerful "love you." Moments later, his own phone rang. It was his boss. Kiba's father answered, only to be met with an unexpected blow. His boss regretfully informed him he was being let go, explaining it was a difficult but necessary decision to support his own family. The call ended, and Kiba's father stared at Kubaru in disbelief, piecing it all together. Kubaru revealed that her father was the CEO of Kubaru Real Estate, the parent company of his workplace. She had simply asked him to pull some strings to make her point clear. After a pause, she calmly offered him a choice: accept the $1,000,000 and she'd request his job back, or refuse, and she'd ensure he'd struggle to find work elsewhere. His anger flared, accusing her of bluffing, but the weight of her influence settled on him like a storm. After a moment of internal struggle, he finally accepted the envelope with the money, his face downcast, defeated. With her goal accomplished, Kubaru turned to Kiba, inviting him to head back and finish their movie. Kiba agreed, and they left his father behind, sitting on the ground, humbled and powerless. In the director's office of Kubaru Real Estate, Kubaru's father sat uneasily. He had agreed to pull strings for Kiba, all because Kubaru had insisted. But as he did it, he couldn't help but wonder about the connection between the two. Was Kiba her boyfriend, perhaps? The thought gnawed at him, but he quickly brushed it aside. Deciding that guessing wouldn't get him anywhere, he resolved to ask Kiba directly. As they walked back into Kubaru's apartment, Kiba found himself lost in thought. He felt a strange relief now that he wouldn't have to deal with his father's harshness anymore. A heavy weight had finally lifted. But alongside that relief was uncertainty. He was still just a minor, taking on a huge risk by running away from home. He was grateful to have somewhere safe to stay, but questions kept swirling in his mind. Was this really the right decision? He had just cut ties with everyone in his life so abruptly. Despite everything, they were still his family. He thought about his mother, wondering what she'd say, likely nothing, as she had always been under his father's control. Noticing the thoughtful expression on his face, Kubaru asked if something was wrong. Kiba quickly brushed it off, but she sensed his concern. Reassuringly, she reminded him that it was natural to feel conflicted after leaving his family, but that he would be okay. She will make him happy, she swore. Kiba looked at her, taking in the determination in her eyes. He couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of gratitude and wonder. She always seemed to know exactly what to do to get others to do whatever she wants. They finished watching the movie together, and Kubaru was buzzing with excitement. Meanwhile, Kiba was wiping away tears, moved by the story's final moments. He admitted the movie was fantastic, especially that last line, which he found so powerful. Kubaru chuckled, teasing him about his emotional reaction before enthusiastically suggesting they watch another film. Kiba was surprised to see it was a romance movie and hesitated, but Kubaru brushed it off, saying it was perfect practice for a future date. Kiba, feeling a bit out of his element, tried to settle into the movie, but his nerves kicked in as a long kiss scene unfolded. He couldn't hide his reaction, and Kubaru noticed. With a smile, she reached over and gently took his hand, guiding his fingers to intertwine with hers. She explained that in moments like these he was supposed to hold her hand. Kiba felt a rush of emotions as they moved closer together, and then she leaned in, suggesting they could take things a step further and share a kiss. Kiba hesitated and ultimately pulled back, telling Kubaru he couldn't go through with a kiss. He admitted he did want to kiss her, but that was exactly why he couldn't. Since she had no intention of actually dating him, it felt wrong. He tried to explain that kissing like this, without genuine feelings, was unfair and would only mess with his emotions. He told her that she needed to be more considerate of her own boundaries and his feelings. Kubaru seemed unfazed and casually mentioned that she wouldn't have minded kissing him. This only frustrated Kiba more. She was so nonchalant about something that meant a lot to him. He reminded her that she told him she didn't like him back at the aquarium, which he'd taken as rejection. Kubaru, amused, clarified that she'd just been making sure they understood their positions. She then asked if he really did like her, noting that it would explain his reaction. Kiba, exasperated, confirmed his feelings, saying she was impossible to deal with. He added that people shouldn't kiss unless they were actually in a relationship. It wasn't a matter of just wanting to. If she truly cared about making him happy, he wished she'd take his feelings seriously. Taking his words to heart, Kubaru promised not to try kissing him anymore. But in the same breath, she added that he still needed romantic experience for his future. She then suggested that, starting tomorrow at school, they should look for a potential girlfriend for him. During lunch break at school, Kiba sat in his classroom, quietly occupying his usual spot beside Kubaru. Kubaru nudged him with a grin and told him he'd be tackling his own romantic comedy today. Kiba only sighed inwardly. Kubaru always seemed to have some grand idea in mind. Kubaru's eyes sparkled mischievously as he asked Kiba if there was any girl he had his eye on. Kiba thought to himself that would be her, but he quickly dismissed the thought and told Kubaru he didn't have any crushes. After all, he'd been bullied and hadn't even made friends until recently. Romance was the last thing on his mind. Kubaru seemed undeterred, declaring that making friends would be a good start. Kiba felt a bit skeptical, but Kubaru reassured him, teasing that he wasn't exactly unattractive and would probably catch a girl's attention soon enough. Kiba didn't know whether to take that as a compliment or not. Just then, Kubaru leaned over and pointed out a classmate struggling to reach the top of the blackboard with her eraser. Her name was Ryouya, and she was stretching up, barely making a dent in the chalk dust high above. Seeing her struggle, Kubaru suggested that Kiba go over and help her. Though hesitant and feeling a bit awkward, Kiba got up and approached Ryouya. With a casual offer, he took the eraser from her and cleaned the board for her. When he finished, he handed the eraser back with a small nod. Ryouya blinked in surprise and shyly thanked him, clearly touched by his small act of kindness. Kiba just nodded, telling her she could ask if she needed help any time, before heading back to his seat. As he sat back down, Kubaru smirked, congratulating Kiba on his first step toward popularity. Kiba dismissed it, muttering that it wasn't as easy as Kubaru made it sound. But Kubaru, as usual, had a bit of wisdom to offer, reminding him that simple acts of kindness could go a long way, often farther than anyone realized. Ryouya stood by the blackboard. She hadn't moved from her spot, her gaze lingering on Kiba as he returned to his seat. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, clearly taken aback by his unexpected kindness. Kubaru noticed and nudged Kiba, smirking with a look of satisfaction. It seemed like her little plan might actually be working, and she couldn't help but feel a bit triumphant at how things were playing out. After that, while Kiba was cleaning the hallway floor, he found himself lost in thought. Kubaru's words kept echoing in his head. What did she mean by writing his own romantic comedy? He hadn't quite figured that out. Just then, Ryouya appeared. She hesitated, nervously fiddling with her hands before thanking him for his help with the blackboard before. Kiba blinked in surprise, almost forgetting the incident. He shrugged it off, saying it was no big deal, but Ryouya seemed insistent. It really had meant something to her. Ryouya tried to say something more, though she stumbled over her words, even biting her tongue in embarrassment. She kept her gaze down, clearly flustered, before finally managing to ask if he'd like to walk home with her that day. Kiba's eyes widened. Walk home, just the two of them. Ryouya quickly clarified, her cheeks turning red as she explained that it wasn't meant to be anything strange. She simply wanted to try the new donut shop near the station but felt too shy to go alone. Since he'd said she could reach out if she needed anything, she hoped he wouldn't mind coming along. Kiba's surprise melted into a warm smile, and he agreed happily, assuring her he'd be glad to join her. At that, Ryo's face lit up, a bright smile breaking through her nervousness. She thanked him again, beaming as she skipped off, excitement in every step. They'd meet after class, and for the first time, Kiba felt like he might just be stepping into his own little romantic comedy after all. As Ryo walked away, Kubaru suddenly appeared beside Kiba, with a wide grin on her face. He hadn't noticed her there, and she seemed to know exactly what had just happened. Kubaru seemed all too pleased with Kiba's after-school date plans, even reminding him not to reveal the fact that they were living together. Kiba felt a little of awkwardness. The whole situation felt like a strange, half-formed love triangle. He liked Kubaru, Ryo clearly liked him, and he was caught in the middle with his own mixed feelings. It was like he'd stepped into a cliché romantic comedy plot, and he couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. As Kiba thought it over, he reminded himself that Kubaru didn't seem to have any romantic interest in him. Maybe it was time to move on from that. More than anything, he wanted to open up, make friends, and finally experience life beyond the loneliness of his past. He'd spent too long isolated by bullying, and he knew this was his chance to try new things and see what life had to offer. But the devil just next to him, and his thoughts were cut short when Kubaru handed him a small microphone, disguised as a pen. She had a plan. She wanted to listen in on the date and give him instructions, like some kind of backstage director. Before he knew it, she was pushing a set of earbuds on him too, so she could talk him through the entire event from a distance. Kiba could barely believe what was happening, but Kubaru made it clear she'd be watching out for any funny business. After school, Kiba waited nervously, feeling the weight of his upcoming date with Ryo. His mind was buzzing with uncertainty, wondering how this would play out, especially with Kubaru's unusual guidance through the earbuds. Soon enough, Ryo arrived, greeting him and asking if he'd been waiting long. Kiba reassured her that he hadn't, and they started walking together. He adjusted the earbuds in his ears and made sure the pen-shaped microphone in his pocket was in place. As they strolled in silence, both of them too shy to start a conversation, Kiba suddenly heard Kubaru's voice come through his earbuds. Kubaru instructed him to tap the earbud if he could hear her, so he did. She quickly followed up with directions, telling him to repeat exactly what she said. Kiba was reluctant, but he went along with it. Following Kubaru's instructions, Kiba turned to Ryo to ask if she liked donuts. Ryo's face lit up, and she responded enthusiastically, saying she loved them. Kiba continued, repeating Kubaru's next line about liking donuts himself. His words stumbled out awkwardly, and he felt himself cringe internally at how forced it sounded. When they arrived at the donut shop, Ryo pointed out that they had reached their destination, and Kiba responded with a simple acknowledgement. He was still focused on following Kubaru's directions through the earbuds, repeating everything she told him, no matter how awkward it felt. They stopped at the front of the shop, Kiba remarking that it was his first time there and that it wasn't his usual kind of place. He glanced at the menu, following Kubaru's instructions to comment on the new items. With a casual gesture, he pointed at the menu and said that the donuts looked delicious. Ryo agreed, her excitement showing as she pointed out how many options there were. She mentioned how tempting it was to try them all, especially since some were limited edition, but she felt ordering two would be overdoing it. Kiba, still feeling a bit out of his comfort zone but following Kubaru's lead, said he understood exactly how she felt. But as their conversation continued, Kubaru suddenly changed course. She instructed Kiba to ask Ryo if she wanted to split the donuts with him. Kiba felt a bit annoyed by the abrupt change in direction but went along with it. He stammered a little, awkwardly asking Ryo if she wanted to split the donuts with him. Ryo looked surprised at first, then smiled and assured him it was fine, especially since it would be with him. Kiba continued following Kubaru's instructions, asked Ryo what she wanted to drink, and offered to place their order while she waited. Handing her his bag to hold, he went to the counter, and as he walked away, Ryo couldn't help but think how kind Kiba was to her. After a short wait, Kiba returned with a tray of donuts and their drinks. Ryo's eyes lit up when she saw the donuts. They looked even more delicious than she'd expected. She reached for her wallet, intending to pay her share, but Kubaru quickly instructed Kiba to refuse the money. Reluctantly, Kiba followed her lead, insisting it was his treat for the day. He even added a gentle touch, lightly taking Ryo's hand, saying that he wanted to be a gentleman this time. Ryo blushed, a bit taken aback, and reluctantly accepted his offer, looking away shyly. She then asked, almost timidly, if Kiba had a girl he liked. The question caught him off guard, but on the other end, Kubaru sounded pleased, noting how well the date was progressing. Kiba managed to answer with a stammer that he didn't have anyone special at the moment. But just then, Ryo's expression shifted. Her face took on an unexpectedly intense look, as if hiding a hint of menace. She muttered that if he did like someone else, she might have had to get rid of him. Kiba froze, completely shocked, before Ryo suddenly burst into laughter, saying it was just a joke. Kiba couldn't keep the nervous look off his face as he repeated Kubaru's lines. But as he fumbled through the conversation, he noticed a shift in Ryo's expression. Her gaze turned sharp, scrutinizing him closely, and she suddenly questioned if the words he was saying were even his own. Kiba froze, realizing he might have been found out. Then she noticed the earbud in his ear and asked why he had it on. In a panic, Kiba removed the earbud, leaving Kubaru cut off on the other end. He was officially on his own, no more guidance. Thinking quickly, he tried to explain that he'd forgotten he had the earbud in from earlier, claiming he'd been listening to music. But Ryo wasn't convinced, and the atmosphere between them turned tense. The mood shifted completely when Ryo's eyes filled with tears. She looked heartbroken, assuming he hadn't actually cared about her. Shocked, Kiba tried to reassure her, insisting that he genuinely enjoyed her company. Her expression softened slightly, and she asked if he'd like to keep spending time together, even inviting him to her house after they finished at the donut shop. The invitation took Kiba by surprise, but he felt torn. Without Kubaru's guidance, he didn't know what to do. But he couldn't just leave Ryo feeling hurt. After a moment's hesitation, Kiba decided to go along with her invitation, pushing aside his guilt about leaving Kubaru out of the loop. When they arrived at Ryo's house, she invited Kiba inside, mentioning casually that she lived alone since her parents were often away but provided for her needs. She offered him tea, asking him to make himself comfortable. Kiba settled down on the sofa, placing his bag on the floor, and waited while Ryo went to prepare the tea. But then, something completely unexpected happened. Quietly, Ryo approached Kiba from behind, and before he could react, she struck him with a large jug. He collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. With a calm expression, Ryo muttered to herself as she picked up Kiba's phone, searching through it with a knowing look. She'd suspected he was lying, and after confirming he'd been talking to another girl, seemed almost satisfied. She whispered that Kiba needed a little lesson, for both his sake and someone else's. It turned out that Ryo harbored a split personality. Her shy, sweet demeanor was the real her, while this menacing side was a different persona entirely. This darker part of Ryo took control whenever she felt the need to protect the real Ryo, seeing herself as a guardian. Meanwhile, on the other end, Kubaru sensed that something had gone wrong with Kiba's date. Kubaru decided to take action. She quickly gathered her things, determined to track down both Kiba and Ryo. She muttered to herself, acknowledging that Ihara Ryo was proving to be far more intriguing and potentially dangerous than she'd initially thought. Kiba slowly regained consciousness, only to find himself bound to a bed. As he took in his surroundings, he saw Ryo beside him, grinning ominously. She wore only her underwear, a choice she explained was to avoid staining her clothes with blood. Kiba's panic spiked at the mention of blood, and her intentions became chillingly clear. She accused him of pretending to care for someone close to her, someone whose heart he had supposedly toyed with. Confused, Kiba tried to understand, and Ryo clarified she was speaking on behalf of Ihara Ryo. Shocked, Kiba realized she was referring to herself by a different name. But then came the unsettling revelation: this wasn't Ryo at all. It was her older sister, Rina, sharing the same body. Rina calmly explained that she was a separate personality created to protect Ryo. In childhood, Ryo had faced severe neglect and abuse. Locked away in a dark storage shed by her strict, unfeeling parents, she had been terrified, crying out for help. In those desperate moments, Rina had emerged as the protective figure Ryo needed. Rina took on the fear, the darkness, and promised to shield her, taking over whenever Ryo faced danger or distress. Now Rina saw herself as the guardian of Ryo's happiness and could not tolerate anyone who seemed to toy with her sister's heart. To Rina, Kiba was guilty of exactly that, and he would face the consequences. As she spoke, she lifted a large knife, her gaze fixed on him, promising to start his punishment with his face. Kiba's panic intensified as he pleaded with Ryo to talk things over, trying desperately to reason with her, but she dismissed his attempts without hesitation. Just then, a knock echoed from the door. Kiba seized the moment, pointing out that someone was there, but Ryo brushed it off, planning to ignore the interruption. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, until finally it stopped, replaced by the unmistakable sound of someone trying to force the lock. Confusion flickered across Ryo's face as she questioned if this was some kind of prank. Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing Kubaru standing confidently on the other side. She held up a thin piece of wire, proudly explaining that she had managed to unlock the door with ease, boasting about the trick she had up her sleeve. Kubaru stepped into the tense scene, quickly assessing the strange situation. Kiba was tied up on the bed, while Ryo, dressed only in her underwear, hovered over him, holding a large knife. Kubaru couldn't resist a sly remark, noting how things had escalated after only one date. Kaiba, exasperated, begged her for help, but Kubaru couldn't help pointing out that this was the result of him ignoring her instructions. Realizing that Kubaru was the girl on the phone, Ryo's expression hardened, her gaze locking onto Kubaru. Tension built as Ryo accused her of lying, believing Kubaru's interference was proof of deception. But Kubaru calmly explained that she'd been guiding Kiba, making choices for him so he'd ultimately find happiness. Ryo, enraged and convinced this was madness, lunged with the knife, but Kubaru was quick to defend herself, blocking Ryo's strikes. Kubaru used Ryo's confusion against her, pointing out that if she continued with the attack, it would be Ryo herself who would suffer. After all, killing Kiba would leave the real Ryo with the guilt of murder without even knowing it. Ryo hesitated, her mind racing, and in that moment of vulnerability, Kubaru deftly disarmed her, tossing the knife aside. Seizing control, Kubaru gently but firmly slapped Ryo's cheeks, bringing her back to her senses. Kubaru calmly proposed a strange solution, a chance for all of them, Ryo, her other self, and Kiba, to find happiness together. Her words were simple yet unsettling, suggesting she could lead them all to contentment if they were willing to trust her guidance. As Ryo tried to process the suggestion, Kubaru casually offered her jacket to cover Ryo, who was still in her underwear, grounding the surreal moment with a gesture of unexpected kindness. For Ryo, the idea of happiness seemed distant, almost impossible. Kubaru, though, spoke confidently, saying that happiness could take many forms: creating a family, diving into hobbies, dedicating oneself to a meaningful path. Kubaru painted a picture of many potential futures, each shaped by the choices they could make, and proposed that she would be there to guide Ryo through them, just as she was doing for Kaiba. As Ryo took in Kubaru's words, they felt irrational yet oddly persuasive, as though some deep part of her wanted to follow this stranger's lead. Against all reason, Kubaru's offer felt enticing, almost like an escape. When she looked at Kaiba, tied up but calm, Ryo suddenly understood he had been drawn in too, willingly or not. Ryo felt a strange mix of disbelief and surrender as she agreed to Kubaru's proposal. It sounded absurd, but something in Kubaru's confident, almost hypnotic presence made Ryo want to obey. Kubaru gave a simple, bold first command for Ryo to kiss Kiba, like in the stories where the kiss seals a happy ending. Though shocked, Ryo was fully under Kubaru's sway and leaned into her instructions, trusting that they'd lead to something she couldn't yet understand. Kubaru promised that following her would open up a world of intense, thrilling experiences. For a moment, as Ryo looked at Kubaru, she saw someone who seemed destined to lead, with an aura of command that felt undeniable. Following Kubaru's order, Ryo and Kiba shared a quiet, unexpected kiss, both submitting to the situation in their own way. Kubaru observed with satisfaction, pleased with how easily her guidance had already begun to shape their actions. Kiba had finally freed himself. The three of them spent some time talking, though the conversation was a bit strange. Kubaru casually suggested they all do something naughty together. Kaiba was confused and asked what she meant. Kubaru teased him, hinting that it was something he had always wanted. Then, without warning, Kubaru started to open her shirt, but Kiba quickly stopped her, feeling uneasy. He argued that what she was proposing wasn't right. Kubaru, however, insisted that breaking the rules was exactly the point. By sharing an immoral secret, they would form a stronger, more unique bond. She explained that she wanted to be as special to both of them as they were to her, and suggested they embrace an honest love triangle. Just as Kiba and Ryo were about to go along with Kubaru's request, her dad suddenly appeared. Kubaru's dad burst into the room. He was startled and demanding to know what was going on. Kubaru greeted him casually, which only seemed to make him more agitated. He pressed her for an explanation, but she dodged, first wanting to know how he found her. Reluctantly, he admitted to using a GPS tracking app. Kubaru gave him a disgusted look, calling him a creep, but he brushed it off, returning to his original question with renewed insistence. Kubaru hinted vaguely at the situation, leaving her dad on edge and nervous. Just when he was beginning to panic, she finally teased that anyone could tell what was happening simply by looking. Her dad, however, was not amused. He immediately ordered them all to stop whatever was going on, citing her unmarried status, and rushed to grab Kiba by the shoulder. After sizing him up, he asked if this was the same Kiba Kubaru had mentioned before, trying to determine if they were dating. Kubaru tried to calm him down, insisting that everything was fine and that her only goal was to make Kiba happy. Suspicious, her dad asked if Kiba had pressured her into anything. Kiba, mortified, quickly denied it. Realizing things were a bit more complicated, Kubaru's dad sighed, suggesting they all take a breath. He assured Kiba that he'd have a proper talk with Kubaru later and introduced himself. Kiba thought Kubaru's father didn't look like the father he had imagined for Kubaru, especially with his youthful look and pink hair. Seeing that it was nearly time for Kiba's curfew, Kubaru's dad offered to give him a ride home. Kubaru interrupted to mention that Kiba was actually living with her now, which sent her dad into shock. He gripped Kiba's shoulder firmly, asking Kubaru for a moment alone with him. She agreed, giving them space as her dad led Kiba out, firmly but politely, suggesting a little car ride for some private conversation. As the car sped down the road, Kiba couldn't help but feel a mounting sense of dread. This was, he thought, a seriously dangerous situation. Kubaru's dad was clearly intense, and his driving was no exception. Breaking the silence, Kubaru's dad spoke, telling Kiba that he had a few questions. He warned him to answer carefully, as his response could decide how things ended. Kiba felt his pulse quicken as Kubaru's dad suddenly floored the gas pedal, causing the car to surge forward at a frightening speed. Then came the question, what exactly was his relationship with Kubaru, and with a straight road ahead but a deadly curve by a cliff coming up, Kiba knew he had no choice but to answer truthfully. He assured him that he and Kubaru were not dating. Kubaru's dad pressing Kiba about whether theirs was a physical relationship. Kiba hesitated before firmly denying it, though he admitted they had kissed. Kubaru's dad was momentarily stunned, and his foot pressed down harder on the gas pedal. Realizing they were speeding even faster toward the curve, Kiba yelled for him to keep his eyes on the road, but his words didn't seem to register. In an emotional burst, Kiba tried to explain what Kubaru meant to him. He spoke about how she had saved his life and how he respected her deeply, not just for her boldness, but for the way she had the power to change everything around her. He only wanted to make her happy. Hearing this, Kubaru's dad seemed to be lost in thought, his eyes unfocused as he processed Kiba's heartfelt words. Without warning, they hit the curve at full speed. The car veered off the edge of the cliff, lifting into the air with terrifying force. In those weightless moments, Kubaru's dad felt time slow down. Everything seemed distant, as if he were watching the scene unfold in a movie. He realized he had done everything he could for her, absolutely everything, as they plummeted down together. Tomata, Kubaru's dad, recalled back to the first time he met Kubaru. In a flashback, he'd been working for her real father, who occasionally asked him to watch over Kubaru on his days off. When he first saw her, Kubaru had the charming smile of any young girl, but there was something unique about her. She introduced herself politely, acting mature beyond her years, and told him she'd be fine in her room, even apologizing for taking up his day. She was talked like an adult at such a young age. But as they spent time together, Tomata encouraged her to loosen up, telling her it was okay to be a bit more playful, even selfish. She was just a kid after all. With a little nudge, she agreed, suggesting a game of catch. Before he knew it, she was dashing around the house, laughing as she challenged him to keep up. Tomata hurried after her. Finally, he managed to catch her. Kubaru looked up at him, with a glint of satisfaction in her eyes, and asked if she'd been childlike enough for him in that moment. Watching her, Tomata felt a fondness that went beyond any typical bond. Kubaru was different, special in her own way. In the office, Tomata had noticed that his coworker, Suzuki, seemed unusually attentive to him. One day, she unexpectedly asked him to meet her privately. She told him that she had feelings for him and wanted to go out with him. Tomata was taken aback and, trying to be gentle, asked if he remembered correctly that she was already married. To his surprise, Suzuki's face crumpled and she began to cry, confessing that her marriage was falling apart and that she had turned to him because he had always been kind to her. She explained that she had hoped he would be the one to offer her a way out. Tomata, though sympathetic, reminded her that infidelity wasn't the answer and that she needed to resolve things with her husband first. After a moment, she apologized for letting her emotions overwhelm her, and he reassured her, relieved she seemed to understand. Deep down, Tomata knew this wasn't the first time he'd been pulled into someone else's struggles. Ever since he was young, he'd had a hard time turning people away, especially those who looked to him for kindness. Another tense moment unfolded at the office when Suzuki approached Tomata again. She confronted him with tears in her eyes, accusing him of being despicable and insisting that he was the reason her marriage had ended. Tomata barely managing to get a word in as she claimed he had promised to be with her if she divorced her husband. He tried to calm her down, explaining he had never made such a promise, but Suzuki wouldn't hear it, convinced he was responsible for her decision. As she wept openly, others in the office began whispering, casting glances in his direction. Inside, he struggled with his instinct to walk away, but his own thoughts held him back. He knew what he should do, distance himself and let her sort things out alone. But worry gnawed at him, imagining her future, the possibility that she might stay single and lonely, with him partially to blame. This was his greatest flaw. He could never truly detach himself from someone who relied on him, even if he knew it would be better for both of them. News of the office scandal reached Kubaru's father, the president of the company. Kubaru's father brushed it off, telling Tomata that he wasn't interested in digging into the details. What mattered to him was Tomata's loyalty and the work he did for the company. He asked for Suzuki's name, and shortly after, Suzuki was quietly let go. Tomata felt conflicted. On the one hand, the president's decision to fire Suzuki was a relief. She had falsely accused him after all. But the decision felt cold. The president wasn't concerned with Tomata's feelings, only with his performance at work. Later, when he went to babysit Kubaru again, she quickly noticed his somber mood. Her innocent concern touched him as she patted his head, gently asking if something was wrong. In that moment, Tomata realized that Kubaru, this small child, was the only one who seemed to truly care about him. He hoped he could be someone she could count on. Just as the thought crossed his mind, he noticed a bruise on her hand. Kubaru hesitated before explaining. She admitted that her father, the president, had been furious after she intentionally left a test blank, trying to get his attention for once. Kubaru explained that he expected nothing but perfect scores from her, and when she handed in a blank test, he punished her harshly, striking her hand with a shoehorn. After that day, Tomata noticed that Kubaru's injuries kept getting worse. One day, he asked her again if her father had hurt her, and Kubaru quietly confirmed it. She explained that her latest mistakes, like handing in a blank answer sheet and accidentally hitting her plate with her fork, had been enough to provoke him. She admitted with a child's painful honesty that she thought her father hated her and even wished that Tomata could be her dad instead. Tomata confronted the president at the office, pleading with him to stop hurting Kubaru. The president brushed it off, dismissing her injuries as minor scrapes from her supposed clumsiness, and scolding Tomata for letting personal concerns interfere with his work. Tomata realized that any wrong move on his part could worsen the situation for Kubaru. In an unexpected turn, the president fell seriously ill with cancer and was hospitalized. Over time, Kubaru was the only one who regularly visited him, showing courage and care despite everything. Tomata joined her visits, supporting her as much as he could. After multiple hospital stays and a long battle, the president's condition deteriorated, and he eventually passed away. At his funeral, only Tomata and Kubaru were present. During that moment, Kubaru asked if he would become her father. Her simple question filled him with a deep sense of purpose, lifting him from the doubts he carried. This time, he was determined to protect her, to be the parent she needed and deserved. Back to the current time, they trapped in a car that had tumbled down a steep cliff and landed precariously on a tree. Kiba quickly took stock of the situation. The car was teetering dangerously close to falling to the ground below. Beside him, Tomata was unconscious, blood trickling from a cut on his head. As Tomata slowly regained consciousness, he could hear Kiba's voice. Kiba worked to release his seatbelt. When Tomata realized Kiba was trying to help him, he couldn't help but wonder why. Kiba explained simply that he was Kubaru's father. She'd be furious if he left him behind. Tomata felt a sense of relief and gratitude. Kiba was different, someone who instinctively took action to protect others. Tomata realized that with Kiba in her life, Kubaru would be in good hands. Kiba carefully helped Tomata out of the car, eventually carrying him on his back as they climbed down the tree. As Kiba carrying him, Tomata added a light-hearted note, mentioning that he didn't like the idea of Kiba and Kubaru staying under the same roof unless they were in a relationship. Kiba nervously agreed. When Tomata and Kiba finally arrived at Kubaru's apartment, Tomata announced their return. Kubaru, noticing their rough appearance, couldn't help but comment on how they looked like they'd been through a disaster. As they settled in, Tomata brought up the topic of Kubaru's plan to live with Kiba. Kubaru was quick to assert her independence, practically daring her father to say no. Tomata froze. He couldn't bring himself to disappoint her and gave his approval. Kiba was surprised. He asked if he was truly okay with it. Tomata admitted that while he wasn't fully on board, Kubaru meant everything to him. He was too afraid of upsetting her by refusing. With a serious look, he pleaded with Kiba to be careful and responsible, warning him not to make any mistakes he'd regret. Kubaru just laughed, amused by the exchange. Sachigawa Hiro, the murderer, sat alone on the bus. She wrestled with feelings she couldn't fully understand, her mind turning over the question of what it truly meant to love someone. When she eventually stepped off the bus, she realized she'd dozed off and decided she'd head home for some rest. As she walked through the morning streets, she accidentally bumped into Kiba. Kiba apologized for not watching where he was going. She looked at Kiba's face closely as she held his cheeks, her eyes sweeping over each injury. After satisfied that Kiba was all right, she stepped away, leaving Kiba in a daze. Hiro found herself in a quiet, secluded spot, but her mind was anything but calm. Anxiety bubbled up as she replayed the moment she had grabbed Kiba's face. She couldn't shake the memory of his shocked expression, and the more she thought about it, the more her nerves frayed. She berated herself, wondering why she'd acted so impulsively. Had he looked disgusted? What must he think of her now? The idea that he might see her as some strange, intrusive woman gnawed at her. She couldn't stop obsessing over the encounter. Hiro's worry finally reached a breaking point. She realized she couldn't bear the thought of being misunderstood. She resolved to find him and clear up any misunderstandings. After school let out, Kiba was walking with Kubaru. She talked about a bargain sale on eggs and in her cheerful way hinted at wanting him to pick some up since she and Ryo had somewhere else to be. Kiba eventually agreed. Hiro was lingered nearby. She tracked down the school after recognizing Kiba's uniform. Back to Kubaru and Kiba. Kubaru thanked Kiba and giving him a quick kiss on the cheek and leave, which left him flustered and lost in thought. He quickly snapped out of it, remembering the sale wouldn't last much longer and that he needed to hurry. As Kiba turned to dash off, Hiro suddenly appeared, grabbing his collar and pulling him against the wall. She looked him square in the eyes, demanding to know what he thought of her after their earlier encounter. Just then, Kubaru and Ryo arrived. Kubaru called out Hiro as a shady lady, instructing her to back off. Hiro tried to explain she meant no harm and only wanted to talk to Kiba, but Kubaru remained skeptical. After a silent standoff, Kubaru smirked and declared that Kiba was off limits. He belonged to her alone. She gathered Kiba and Ryo, quickly guiding them away. As they leave, Hiro's mind was freaking out again. Kubaru's dismissive attitude replayed in her mind, treating her like an insignificant inconvenience. She couldn't help but wonder what kind of expression someone as carefree as Kubaru would have as she was on the brink of the death. At other place, Kubaru and friends having good time together. Kiba suddenly remembered the eggs he was supposed to buy. He realized he'd forgotten them entirely. Kubaru just laughed it off, shrugging and pointing out that at least they had made it in time for ice cream. Kiba glanced at the treat in her hand. He couldn't help but notice its unusual. He wondered what it tastes like. As if she could read his thoughts, Kubaru explained the shocking pink color hid a surprising chocolate mint flavor. Kiba was taken aback. He would never have guessed that from the look of it. Kubaru offered him a taste, but Kiba quickly declined, mentioning that chocolate mint wasn't really his thing. She'll take note of that with a sly smile. Kiba could only shake his head. As Kubaru enjoyed her ice cream, a small drop of it suddenly landed on her uniform, leaving a bright stain. She looked down and sighed, realizing she'd made a mess. Instead of rushing to clean it, though, she decided to finish her ice cream first so she could wash the stain out afterward. Once she finished, Kubaru thanked Kiba and Ryo for the treat, jokingly telling them to take it easy while she took care of her little accident. Kiba telling her that both him and Ryo will wait for her there. With a quick thanks, Kubaru headed to the restroom to rinse out the stain on her uniform. In the restroom, Kubaru carefully washed her uniform by the sink, relieved to see that the ice cream hadn't left a lasting stain. She let out a small sigh of relief, preparing to head back to her friends. But before she could turn around, Hiro appeared silently behind her. In one swift motion, Hiro clamped a hand over Kubaru's mouth and wrapped a rope around her neck. Kubaru's eyes widened in shock as Hiro leaned close, issuing a chilling warning. If she made a scene, she wouldn't leave the room alive. Kiba and Ryo waited patiently, but it was too long. Ryo voiced her worry, and Kiba, starting to feel uneasy himself, asked if she could go check. Ryo agreed, heading toward the restroom to see what was keeping Kubaru. When Ryo reached the restroom, she found only Kubaru's handkerchief lying on the floor, with no sign of Kubaru herself. She rushed back to Kiba, clutching the handkerchief tightly. She breathlessly explained that Kubaru had vanished and showed him the handkerchief she'd discovered. The realization that something terrible might have happened hit her hard, and with the shock, Ryo fainted, collapsing in front of Kiba trying to wake her after her sudden collapse. But when she stirred, it wasn't Ryo who emerged. Instead, her other personality, Rina, that took control of Ryo's body. Without warning, Rina gave Kiba a swift headbutt, jolting him back with a mix of irritation and urgency. Rina was instantly on her feet, demanding action.